Okay, everyone, one final international break of 2024. So let's do our final lot of viewers' questions, statements, opinions, etc. And we've got a whole heap of stuff to talk about today. So I'm going to actually split this over a couple of videos. Okay, we've got John on. Hello, John. How are you?
Hi Hamish, how you doing? I'm doing well. Another international break, unfortunately, but we'll get through it together, shall we say.
We're not moaning about it though. Positive attitude. Asim's on as well. Hello, Asim.
Hi Hamish, hi John. Good to be back on. But it's good times with Celtic right now, so lots of positivity, I'm sure.
What's the thoughts on the weekend then, guys? Very briefly, because I feel like folk have probably moved on slightly. John, give me your assessment. I thought it was a pretty good win, all things considered.
Good win, good match, testing match. Thought Kilmarnock gave it a good go, but I think Celtic just find a way to win at the moment, don't they? I think the pitch was a factor. I think a lot of people have been saying that. That's no surprise. It was a very physical match, very combative match, and Celtic are going to need to come through those tests to be champions again. But I think it just puts a nice cap. I think, Rodgers has been speaking quite a lot about splitting this season into the chunks between the international breaks. And I think if you look at the last chunk, obviously we would drop points against Aberdeen. But apart from that, the results have been spot on. And I think the weekend just, put a nice wee cap on that, heading into this international break and looking forward to another tough schedule after we come back.
Yeah, just to echo that, it's interesting that obviously despite how well Celtic are doing, we went into that game having to win to stay top of the league, and I think that just keeps everyone on their toes. It's one of those fixtures which, under normal circumstances, and I think Rodgers alluded to it after the game, last season or even previous seasons, that kind of performance and that kind of game after a European night could easily have ended up in drop points, and as you're watching it, you felt that could be the case, and it wouldn't have been a disaster, but I think that just speaks to how good the Celtic team is at the moment, that even when playing like that, we managed to dig it out and have the quality in both ends of the pitch to get not only a clean sheet, but in the end, a 2-0 victory. So, yeah, couldn't really ask for more from that.
It wouldn't have been a disaster, he says. He should have been in our group chat, John, eh? It was felt like a disaster during that second half.
It's funny because I came to that group chat after I wasn't watching the group chat during the game, and so I came to the group chat aspect of it after, and yeah, it was funny. It's always funny seeing a catastrophe unfold in front of your eyes when you have the hindsight of knowing that we picked up a good result. Yeah, again, we went away and beat Motherwell, gone away and beat Kilmarnock. Both those teams will be aiming to get into the top 6 this season. So I think that wee stretch could be one of the more difficult runs of Premiership games that we'll have of the season. Obviously playing Aberdeen at home as well, who are flying. So I think coming through all that, I'm feeling pretty good about everything. And ultimately found the goals and found the way to win, which is what you want from your team when they're not firing on all cylinders. Especially after, as Asim said, I think it's an important point, after the emotional and physical toll that was taken against Leipzig, to go away to Kilmarnock and pick up a win is perfect.
Are you at your seat, Asim? Have you now changed it to where you actually sit?
So this is where I sit, 405. It's a great view, and this was taken on the day of the Slovan Bratislava game. So we had a lovely sunset, lovely performance that evening. So yeah, this is the view from 405. Can't really complain.
Lovely.
Not a bad view. I sat up there for I think the Michelin game. Remember we played them first game back after COVID, and
one of the lucky 8,000.
I was, yeah. Lovely view up there. Okay, on with the questions, everyone. We'll start with Michael. In fact, there's 3 questions here that are kind of linked, and we should just say Asim's not actually seen any of these questions, so me and John will take centre stage and allow you to come in after. Okay, Michael, any chance of a discussion on who we should sign in January and which players should be sold or moved on? We've got Aidan O'Brien. With us already having a full Champions League squad, where would you strengthen in January and who would you let go to free up those squad places? And kind of similarly, Jack saying, is there any need for a marked improvement for the depth at left wing and right back? Surely we can't move forward with Ralston and Palma. Time's up. Who would you like to see brought in? I'm personally thinking of keeping it Scottish. Max Johnston, Matthew Anderson. Now I'm against Max Johnson simply because we would then have 2 right backs called Johnston, and we can't have that. I feel like Ralston's kind of all right, all things considered.
he's a homegrown squad player, and I think Johnston's shown he has, he can play most of our matches, so I'm not in a massive rush there. Just in general, I mean, it's a tricky one, this January one. I'm not sure how much business we're actually... I don't want to get people's backs up already, but I'm not sure how much business we're actually going to be doing in January, to be frank. Just in terms of... I think it's going to be one of those ones, if the right player comes along, Celtic will try and make their move from it. I don't think they're going hunting too much for players here. I think Rodgers did the business he wanted towards the end of the window. Obviously, we're maybe one or two short. I think if you're looking at it, you might see Lewis Palma move on, you might see Odin Holm move out on a loan, and then you're thinking probably bring in another attacking midfielder, winger type player. Apart from that, I don't think we'll be in any great rush, obviously depending what's going on with Alex Valle. But I don't think we'll solve the left back position in January. I think that'll probably be one that waits until the summer, even though we have Greg Taylor, currently on an expiring contract, and that Valle situation. Will the right player, if the right left back is available in January, we might go for him. But I just don't see Celtic actively hunting too much for upgrades in this specific transfer window. I've just got a feeling, whether that's right or wrong, whether I'd be happy with that, we'll wait and see. But that's just my gut feeling on things at the moment.
Rodgers wants 2 quality players in every position, doesn't he? So goalkeeper, I'd say we're fine there. Schmeichel's clearly going to play virtually every game. Right back, I personally feel we're fine. I think centre back, we're as strong as we've been in a number of years. 3 pretty good centre backs there. Stephen Welsh can always come in. We've got Naropsky there. He might be someone who moves on. Left back, I'm kind of content as well. Midfield, we're so strong. We've got 5 quality midfielders. The wings for me are the issue, specifically left wing. I think Palma will probably move on. And if he does, you clearly need to bring someone in to really compete with Maida. And we were linked to a few in the summer, weren't we? Like Boguts, I think, could play in the left. And was it Balak Vischer was the other one from Antwerp? Maybe another forward as well. I don't know, Johnny Kenny might be that third forward. I maybe feel he's maybe not, but he could be scoring some goals. So for me, a winger and a forward, and I'd probably be happy enough, Asim.
Yeah, that's the 2 areas I thought even back in summer I was a wee bit I thought we had a great transfer window, and it's proven to have worked out that way as well. But that was the 2 areas where I just felt we were maybe slightly short, just because if you get an injury to one of Kyogo or Ida, it then means you're having to rely on Maida to come in as the backup striker, and then that weakens the left wing area as well. So I think it's twofold, and even in the wing department, I think Maida and Kuhn, brilliant, especially Kuhn. But then I think there's a fair drop off after that. And now, as much as James Forrest has been doing really well, and I think you seen even at the weekend there came on and I thought did well when he came on at Rugby Park. I just think beyond that, again, if we're looking and if we're hoping that this summer was a sign of change in terms of how Celtic deal with recruitment, in terms of progressive and forward thinking, I think we need to already be looking ahead to how prepared we want to be for those Champions League qualifiers potentially in summer.
Yeah.
So that for me means get your wingers in now, get your forwards in now. That can not only strengthen the second half of this season, where, let's be honest, we're hoping to have at least a playoff in the Champions League. I don't know how the transfer window works in terms of being able to strengthen your squad for the competition in January, but just in general, I think those are the 2 areas that I think Rodgers will want to strengthen, and I hope with the way things are going, we're not going to slacken off this time and actually make sure and get the business done.
I think Nicholas Kuhn's a pretty good advert for what a January sign-in can be. Obviously arrived last year, had a fairly slow few months, but well documented, an injury issue or a medical issue just before he joined the club. But he had that kind of 6 months to settle at the club, and then really hit the ground running in the summer. So I think what Asim's saying, Kuhn's a pretty good direct example of what you would ideally bring in during a January window. Maybe not someone who you think is going to be a game changer straight away, but as Asim says, someone who can have an impact in the summer qualifiers if we have to go down that route, and then just have someone firing and ready to go. Yeah.
2 things. First thing, when we win the Champions League, we won't have any qualifiers for next season, so there is that. Second thing, the squad we have at the moment is for the January games as well. So obviously
Right.
we can't make any changes to that. But any signs we make in January, we could then play from the knockout rounds onwards.
Yeah.
So so that's where we're at. Okay. Cal Tracker, who's always a big fan of the channels, thanks for the support. With Kyogo being called up to the Japan team alongside Reo and Maeda, as well as guys like AJ, Engel, Scales, Trusty, etc. being called up consistently, do you think that could give us an edge in the future in both the transfer market and on-pitch performance? John, am I right in saying that Celtic actively target international players, or certainly did under Mark Lowell?
I think it's part of the, if they have an archetypal model of a player they want to sign, I think it's a player under 23 who already has international experience. I think that's the ideal. That's the ideal for them, because they see, it helps resale value down the line. They're also getting exposure to different competitions, different levels. I think, though, just on that question, I think Celtic's a fairly well-regarded club in terms of internationalists anyway. I think a lot of our players are internationals and have been over the last decade, I would suggest. So I don't think it's necessarily a new thing that's really boosting our, view of a place to come and develop. I think what will help Celtic in the long run is if the players who are moving on, such as Matt O'Reilly and others, Jota to an extent, if he manages to catch fire in one of the top 5 leagues, if Celtic can be a place, that bridging place for players to find elite clubs to go on and shine further. I don't know if the international thing is necessarily a big part of that. But I don't think Celtic's really as... I don't think countries are as put off by Celtic as maybe some people think. I think if you're thinking about maybe the super elite countries, then maybe. But as we've seen, Belgium are more than happy to give Engels a shot. I think Kyogo specifically has had issues with the Japan national coach, so I don't think that's really been a Celtic thing. So I think Celtic's pretty well regarded in terms of international. It doesn't hurt, obviously, but I don't think this sudden rush is a massive boost to our attractiveness as a club.
Yeah, certainly a good number we've got away at the moment. Did you want to say something, Asim?
I don't think it would have made a difference at all in terms of Matt O'Reilly's, in terms of where he headed. I think it was the right time for him to move for all involved. But there was not chat as well. I think the Denmark manager at points was quite critical of our league and things like that. And look, he managed to get a couple of caps even while he was with us. I think the fact that Arne Engels at only 21's got a Belgian cap already, I think that's really helpful for us. Moriyasu, the Japanese manager, you're right, John, he's picked Maeda consistently. Reo Tati's been in a lot of squads, albeit not getting much game time at all. And Kyogo, Japan are blessed with lots of really good attacking players, so it's not an absolute shock sometimes that he's not been involved. But I just think generally for our squad to have this many internationals playing at playing for good countries, I think it's a good thing. I know there's always a risk of injuries and things like that, but generally, if you've got a squad of players all playing at the highest level internationally, it does make players who come, if we're looking to attract players in the future, at least they can't have that kind of doubt that, if I go there, maybe I'm not going to get much recognition internationally. So I think it's helpful in that sense. But as you guys have both said, we've always kind of had a sprinkling of internationals throughout. I don't know if this is probably the most we've had, though, because I was looking through the team: Casper Schmeichel, Johnston, Carter Vickers, Trusty, Greg Taylor. You look through that whole kind of lineup, other than Callum McGregor, who's and Kuhn, I think, from the team that started against Leipzig. I think every single one of them are internationals, which is quite a good thing.
Certainly is. Okay, Daniel Fraser, what's the latest news on the Celtic End? I've not heard about the Celtic End for a while, guys. I sit in the Jockstein lower stand. I would love if they actually turned it into a standing section. I remember speaking to someone years ago, I think when they first announced this, and he said this is going to be a real long-term thing, and they probably wouldn't admit that publicly, the Green Brigade and the boys and Celtic Shared and all that, but I think it is going to be a long-term chipping away at this type thing.
I mean, I don't think they would shy away from that assessment either. I think if the club were aligned with the supporters groups on it, it would be a different thing. I think it could possibly be facilitated within a couple of years, but I don't think the club are aligned with the supporters groups on it. So, like, then that just automatically makes it far more difficult. You're not only trying to win the hearts and minds of supporters who sit in those sections who might not want to be moved. You're suddenly, fighting against. I think I've said on this before, but for these sort of projects to really take hold, they need passionate support and advocates within the club, and do they have that? Is there someone within the club who's really pushing for it? I don't think there is, so I think that makes it really difficult. But we know that they're still promoting it when they can, specifically around the women's games. When they can promote the Celtic End as a concept, they'll take the chance to do that. But I just can't see it happening anytime soon, which is unfortunate for me, But that's just the way it sits at the moment, as far as I'm aware. I don't know if you're hearing anything different, Asim.
Was it last season that it was trialled, or was it the tail end of the season before?
Tail end of the season before.
Yeah, season before.
And it looked brilliant. Nobody can deny how great that looked, and how much of an added spectacle and feel it would give to the match going experience. But then on the other side, you've got the argument for those that have sat there for decades and aren't interested in moving. But as John says, if there was a real kind of wish, I think it was last season where there was a bit of controversy around it, where I think they came out with a statement and said that they've been in constant negotiation trying to make it happen. And I think this was around the point where there was, the club and the Green Brigade, etc. They weren't getting along whatsoever. So it just seemed like all sort of dialogue broke down, and it's never really kicked off since. It would have been good to trial it again tomorrow for the Chelsea game. It would have been a perfect opportunity to
Is that
do
not
that.
happening?
No, they did it in New Douglas Park for one of the other European games, but I don't think it's happening at Celtic Park as far as I'm aware.
Which is disappointing. I think that would have been a great opportunity to try it again. It's something I would like to see going forward, but it just seems like, as John says, not everyone's in alignment as to the desire for it to happen.
It's just such a divisive issue, and I think that's disappointing because, again, from speaking to people that have been campaigning for this from the start, they really didn't want it to become a divisive issue. It probably always was going to be, but their intention was always just for everyone on both sides to keep an open mind. That was what they asked for. But I get it. I get that people have sat in those seats for years and probably don't want to be moved. And I also get there's generally, I'd say, in the Celtic support, there are a lot of people who don't have a lot of time for ultras groups and the Green Brigade, etc. And a lot of people who do really like them. So while all that's going on, and as you say, when the club don't seem to have that much interest in it, you struggle to see it happening.
I think it would be genuinely a good thing for both the promotion of Celtic as a match day experience and just helping with overall atmosphere. I think it would be a good step forward, a good productive step forward. But I just think that the barriers seem tough, and unless, I think, again, we know Celtic are quite resistant to change unless it's over a really long period. So I think it's maybe just like a generational thing. Will it be something that people keep a candle alight for 5-10 years? I think that's the kind of time frame we're talking about, unfortunately.
Just one last point on that. Just other than obviously the fans that would have to get moved, which I get is a big factor, and I just don't see why anyone else wouldn't see the benefit and what it would add to the spectacle, what it would add to, like, can you imagine in a Champions League second half you're facing down that, turning it into our own kind of version of the cop or the yellow wall? It would just be brilliant. So I do get the argument against it from those that do actually sit there, but other than that, I can't imagine many people being against it.
I think I'm right in saying Rangers have it now, Aberdeen certainly have it, Hibs have it, and I think Hearts have it as well. So we're kind of the only one of the big five in Scotland not to have it. But anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. We'll come back to that question right at the end. Henrik's tongue, as we're nearing January, who would you keep in terms of those out of contract? Taylor, Forrest, Schmeichel, Valle, who's on loan obviously. Surprisingly, transfer market only has Bain being the only summer 2026 expiry. Decent management of squad, but more importantly, Rodgers' final year. For me, everyone apart from Bain should be getting tied up soon, so we can do this pretty quickly. Greg Taylor, would you guys keep him? Renew him?
No, I would keep Greg Taylor. I would keep Greg Taylor because I think even if you're looking at signing a new left back next summer, I think Greg Taylor's a fantastic still be a fantastic squad player. But it depends what Greg Taylor sees his future as. Does he want to be a squad player at Celtic? Does he want to be the main man at Celtic? Is he good enough to be the main man at Celtic? I think some people don't think so. But I think he's been a fantastic player for us, specifically over the last 2 or 3 years. And I would be in no rush whatsoever to get rid of him. I think it would be fantastic to see him sign a new long-term contract, because I think he can be part of that leadership group at Celtic for years to come, basically. So I'd be no rushing to get rid of him at all.
Forrest, Michael, Valle, what are you saying?
Forrest seems to be like it's a year-to-year thing.
He'll be a one-club man. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, Rodgers rates him as a squad player, and as he can come off the bench and still provide a decent role in terms of that. Valle, obviously, I think I would look to keep him, but I don't know how possible that is. And then the Schmeichel one is, we've got an option on that, so that's not necessarily negotiating new terms. It just depends whether that'll be a personal decision on his. I think if he's extending his football career, I think he'll stay at Celtic. I think if he's doing a Joe Hart and thinking that retirement's coming soon, then obviously he'll be away.
Just quickly on James Forrest, if he is a one club man, who would be the last one club man before him? Must be. Has there been any other in the 21st century? I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? I can't think of any who've come through the youth and then retired with us. No, I think you're right.
Be mad, wouldn't it? Mad, especially if he wins all his trophies. He'll go down as a legend. Okay, Asim, I'll give you the next one. John O'Neill, favourite forward line that you can remember or have seen in old footage, but the catch is that you can't use any of the Lions or the King of Kings. You can do players that you've seen then, and I assume by forward line are you talking two, or are you talking a forward and two wingers? You can do whatever you want.
So can't use the King of Kings. I would go for Sutton. Really enjoyed watching that. That's that Celtic team. It's my favourite Celtic team that I've ever seen. So yeah, I'll put Sutton in there. It's tough. I'd put if we're playing two wingers either side, maybe Jota on one side and Nakamura played more centrally, so on the other side, Nicholas Kuhn on current form, but it's a tough one because there's always been that debate about who's the best since Larsson in terms of the striking positions, and I think Kyogo's put himself in that frame now. His longevity, there's always arguments for Dembele and Edward, but I just think it's fourth season now Kyogo's been here. So yeah, I'll stick Kyogo in there. I know the formation doesn't really work out because you've got Kyogo, Sutton and Jota, but yeah, I'll go for those three off the top of my head.
I'm very random, but I don't mind it.
Presuming by the King of Kings, he means Georgios Samaras, is that right?
You love Samaras.
I always had a soft spot for him. I wouldn't put him in an all-time forward line list. I just wanted to throw his name in there. Obviously, you had Big Jan and Scott McDonald, functional partnership. I think Kyogo is the best since Larsson, though, for me. Yeah, and obviously Dembele and Edouard were fantastic players, but Kyogo's he makes me smile watching him. And he's just got that wee bit of magic that you just love as a supporter. So I would go with Kyogo in there.
And I'm reading the question. I don't know if John means by forward line players that played together. Yeah. I think, remember Zarafsky and Hartson played together? Mm-hmm. Probably not for too long, maybe a season. Always thought they were a really underrated partnership.
Do you know another one? Stokes and Hooper, I thought were really good for a while. I remember a game against Aberdeen that was at 9-0, and I think they both scored a hat-trick apiece, and they just worked really well together for that season. So there's another one.
And we had McDonald, Hesselink and Samaras all at the club at the same time as well when we won the league. So that was good. Right, final question. This is a good one. Joseph Cassidy, how long do you see Brendan Rodgers staying at Celtic? So he's contracted for another year and a half. He's basically halfway into his 3-year spell. What do you reckon, John? Are we seeing Rodgers here for a good few years after that, or is it too early to say?
But you're asking if we're here we go 10 in a row. It's going to start.
I wasn't going to use that, but fair enough.
I think he stays for as long as he wants. I think what we've kind of said before is Rodgers has now been and done the England thing. How high is his stock in England? What does he want to achieve left in his career? Does he want to manage in Spain? He spent quite a lot of time in Spain. I think the plan before Celtic came calling was he was going to take a year off and then really decide what he wanted to do with the rest of his career. Obviously, we kind of pushed him along and brought him back to. I think he was back to prove a point and restore the reputation that he damaged when he left Leicester City. So, I think he's here for as long as he wants to be here. I don't, and when does the challenge run out for him? I think he's really enjoying testing himself on a European stage at the moment, and I think as long as he feels like he's getting the resources to really build a team that is capable of competing at that level, then I think he'll be pretty happy at Celtic. And it's up to the club to continue to back him with those resources and ensure that, because the resources Celtic have is massive. The revenue we're generating at the moment is ridiculous, frankly ridiculous, and that needs to be reinvested into the team. So I think as long as Rodgers feels like he's getting that back in, then I think he'll enjoy staying in Scotland. But I think he's made it quite clear on a number of occasions, even since he returned, that he has a fairly low opinion of Scottish football, and often. And so inevitably he might get the urge to seek another challenge elsewhere. But I think Europe's the main event for him, and also piling up those winners' medals.
Do you think there's a target he has for Europe in his mind? Does he want to get us to a quarter final of the Champions League, or do you think it's just generally I want to start getting good results in Europe?
I think it's just about restoring pride in Europe, isn't it? That's what it feels like for me anyway, and that's what I want to see. I don't think anyone's under any illusions that we're going to win the Champions League, apart from yourself earlier in this video. But it's really just about being competitive and testing yourself against the best players in Europe. And making sure that they know they're in the game and picking up results here and there, and being proud to represent Celtic in Europe and making Celtic a place a club that people are talking about. And I think people are talking about Celtic. I think we've been one of the surprise packages in Europe this year. And I think I think that's effectively what Rodgers is wanting to do with the club. Yeah.
Yeah, what was it he said? He'll be here until he's emptied, or for the 3 years. Wasn't that what he said in his press conference? I think it comes down to ambition, and if the club can match his ambition, he's clearly an ambitious manager. I think he wants to leave a kind of legacy this time, and I think it is primarily down to what we do in Europe. He spoke about it in the press conference after the Leipzig game. It's been talked about as a generational game. That's the kind of thing that will get him going, that he's the one that's been in charge of that game, that we can go back to Lyon or Benfica, 20 odd years ago, has been the last time Celtic dominated a big team like that in the Champions League. The stat that we all talk about, when was the last time Celtic won a knockout game in Europe? Again, going back 20 years, he'll want to be the guy that does that. And I think this new format lends really well, because we're now challenging ourselves against 8 different teams, 8 different managers. That kind of stuff excites Rodgers, I think, a lot more than obviously the kind of routine domestic stuff. And even in the previous group phases where it's just your 3 teams home and away, I think he really enjoys this format. I think Celtic are really benefiting from this format, and I think as long as we keep being progressive in recruitment, as long as we keep getting European football, and he'll have these. I think, look, we're in the Champions League, so it's hard to tell right now how far we can go in this competition. I think we've all now got our heart set on at least making this top 24, and then thereon after we can dream. But if we're, for example, worst case scenario, we got into the Europa League, and I'm looking at the Europa League this season and looking at the kind of table and teams, this current Celtic team, and if we continue to improve, you'd fancy us to go on a run in that kind of competition. And if we end up in that competition, I know the only way we can end up in it is by not winning the league, I think, or not qualifying, sorry. So ideally we don't want to be in that situation, but you want to build the club and squad up to a position where we're generally competing against these teams, as we've shown in the last couple of games, Atalanta, Leipzig. I now go into any game, and I might be naive, but feeling like we can compete, and that's all we've really asked for the last few years.
Yeah, I think it's also, Rodgers, people within the club, specifically Peter Lawwell, will have a pretty good steer of where UEFA are going with the competitions in the future. So if the format's been expanded, say 5 years, UEFA have a plan where they're extending it to 10 or 12 games somehow, suddenly that's a massive chunk of your season that is a bit of a game changer. It's no longer just, Europe's just a wee sideshow. It suddenly becomes, no, actually Europe is actually like a third of our season that is the main event that is exciting people most. So I think that is a factor as well. So where does Rodgers see the football landscape heading? There's always the lure of massive money from Middle East clubs and all that as well. So there is potential exit routes for Rodgers, but I think certainly at the moment I don't think he's going to be leaving next summer. Let me put it that way, and I think he'll stay beyond, and then we'll see what happens at the end of that season. But he seems happy at the moment.
I think that's a really good point you made, though. Sorry, just about the fact that even if you look, the Aston Villa game's not till the end of January, so that's 8 games, and it's in January. Then if you make a playoff, you're going to best part of February. That's as you say, a large chunk. It's no longer just up until November, December, and then essentially if you get knocked out and you're doing okay domestically, the season kind of sometimes falls flat. Unless obviously like last season we had to come from behind again. But I think this just keeps everyone so engaged so much, even as a fan base. I can sense the excitement amongst different fans. So that'll beacon into the players and management alike. So I think you're right. That could be something that going forward keeps them here longer than we may have anticipated.
And domestically, what are we if we win the league this season? 4 in a row?
4. Yeah.
Just leave that there, guys. Just leave that there. Right, okay, we'll head off for now. We're going to do part 2 that'll be with you very shortly. So thanks for watching this one, and we'll speak to you very soon.